All right, in this episode, where we typically talk to people about how they lead, we are headed to Hawaii, which I don't think I've done too many interviews in Hawaii, but it definitely isn't my first, and it hopefully won't be my last. But we're here with a panel of guests, and we have Marlise, LaRae, and Germaine. And so let's just first put you all into context, who you are. You're all in the same stake, and we're going to talk about a special trek, a cultural trek that you all helped organize. And man, any trek talk, I know there's a lot of stake leaders out there or ward leaders, I guess, that lean in because everybody seems to take their turn with putting on a trek, and so the more we can learn, the better. But Marlise, I guess you're the one that initially reached out to me. Is that right?
Yes.
Awesome.
We had this wonderful experience. My husband and I were asked to join this committee for our stake trek, but we called it Huaka'i. And so being part of this committee was eye-opening. It was a wonderful experience. And I just thought afterward, this would be something that other leaders would appreciate knowing, and maybe it could spark some inspiration for them in their own areas. So
awesome.
That's why I contacted you.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you did, and now we're recording, so this is cool. So, LaRae, what was your involvement in this?
Okay, so as I was the stake Young Women's president, and I had an advantage to being able to participate in the last trek, which was 4 years prior, and we did do a traditional trek. So I got to see that went through and then be able to be part of this process. But I think learning, we wanted to go forward and do something a little different. And so we decided that we'd like to set it up as have a committee and a separate committee chair where it wouldn't be the stake young men and young women presidents doing it and leading it. And so I'm so glad we tried that method, which is then why we have Germaine and her husband, who were the committee heads, and then we stood by to support them in whatever ways that they needed.
Cool. Awesome. And then you're all in the Hilo area on the Hawaii island, the big island. I want to make sure we put this into context, especially those who are maybe more familiar with Hawaii. So is that, would you say, it's pretty, as far as the church goes in Hawaii, I know generally the church is pretty, it's thriving in Hawaii, but is that pretty traditional, thriving area of Hawaii related to the church?
The church here in Hawaii is very much established. On all the islands, we have a long history within the church. Joseph Fielding Smith, served his mission here, and deep roots, which is then where we did take off with the Huaka'i and helping our youth to explore that area, using the history of our saints here. So
maybe speak to me just about the tradition of youth treks in Hawaii. Obviously, being born and raised in Utah, I did my own trek as a youth, and I've participated some as an adult leader. It just seems like every 4 years or so, that's sort of what you do. And this tradition of a trek, sometimes it's not free of criticism at times, where people think it's very Utah centric or pioneer centric, when in reality, it obviously, the pioneers and migration and the history of our church, has a strong tradition and the sacrifice that pioneers went through and whatnot. So it seems like a natural thing to focus on with a group of youth. But just from a Hawaii standpoint, are most stakes in Hawaii doing some type of trek every 4 years or so?
I want to say yes, they have done it. And then there have also been years where there are gaps where it didn't happen. And I want to, this is just my own perspective, it could be different somewhere else, but I think it has been a little bit different sometimes to connect to that whole pioneer narrative, which that's totally church culture. If you belong to the church, that is your culture. But difficult for our youth here in Hawaii to understand snow, the whole ice, all of that is really quite foreign to them. So we did, like I said, do a traditional trek as best we could back in 2017, or at least that's what I was able to participate and help plan. But, from that, learning that we could do things that could help them to connect better with the same principles, I think, but using something that they might be able to relate to a little bit better.
Yeah. And Marlise, had you done any type of a trek before this one, or
No,
been
no,
involved in
even
one?
growing up,
Okay.
it was a little bit before my time. It wasn't so, I mean, after my time. It wasn't so common when I was growing up to do a trek. So I learned about them later on, like when I was in college or after. So this
Uh-huh.
was totally new.
Nice. Interesting. So, and the traditional trek that happens there, I mean, is it with hand carts or a lot of walking, or I mean, does the landscape of Hawaii? I mean, I just think of like Jurassic Park movies when I think of Hawaii, you know, like just jungle and beaches or whatever. But is it tricky to do a traditional trek in Hawaii, or?
So the one that we did have hand carts, and they had hand carts that were passed on from years before that we did use. So
Oh,
they've
wow.
done it, but the trick has always been to find a location that's going to allow us to safely walk and have an actual trek experience, right? Of walking and it being difficult. And we do have that kind of terrain, but it's
Uh-huh.
just difficult to find, you know, a location that's going to allow us to do that, right? Of course, we're doing it in the sun. We're never going to have the
Uh-huh.
kind of cold and that kind of thing. So.
Nice. And LaRae, were you or Marlise, were you involved? Did you not come on the scene with this trek until they'd already decided to do more of a cultural
Yeah,
trek?
that's correct.
Okay. And so maybe LaRae, just tell us the story. Like, how were you in the meetings? Like, was it just a typical correlation meeting where this idea came up, or had there been, some fatigue with the traditional trek experience? Or, I mean, how did this idea surface?
I think that having participated in the last one, those questions came up, right? About, okay, how are the kids, how are they relating to this? How does it make sense to them? We're trying to connect things for them. And so it felt foreign. And so we did think that, we've got to figure out a way to make this connect to them better. What better way than with their own cultures? But now that's another issue as well, because when you look at the background of each of the youth here, we have such a variety, right? Hawaii is the melting pot. We don't just have
Yeah, that's for sure.
Hawaiian, right? We have Filipino, we have Samoan, we have all kinds, right? And so why did we just choose one culture to focus on? Because there would just be too many, right? So we chose Hawaiian because we are in Hawaii. And what better way to pay tribute to this place, this beautiful place that we live in, which is why I think we decided to go there. But I think a lot of it was as we prayerfully chose our committee chair people, right? So Germaine and her husband, and then as they put together their committee, and then also with that committee, then they solidified that idea. They were throwing out ideas, and I love that idea about councils, right? How the church and the Lord has said councils is the way that it goes, right? Is that scattered revelation, right? Brought all together, and everyone's experiences all led to Hawaiian culture. That's where the forte was in the committee that they had put together. And they could all agree that that was going to be the best way to reach the youth and to create that. And even those who weren't Hawaiian, right? There are youth who don't have Hawaiian as part of their ethnicity, but we live here. So this is how we connect. We live in this place. So
yeah. And then tell me about the name. How do you pronounce the name of the trek again? Huaka'i.
Yeah.
And what's the significance of that word?
Okay, well, let me just give you a real brief. In the Hawaiian language, we call the word is kauna. Kauna is where you one word can mean so many different things. There's so many hidden meanings behind it, and then I'm sure that's the case for many cultures. But Huaka'i, it just by itself means like an excursion or taking a trip.
Oh, okay.
But if you were to break that word up, hua by itself means fruit or an offspring or the result of something, the effect of something. And then ka'i means to lead or direct or lift up and carry something. So there's just so much in that, right? We're going on a trip. We're going on a trek. We're going on a Huaka'i. But at the same time, the hua is our youth, is all of us. We are all the fruit of the labors of our kupuna, our ancestors, our parents, leaders ahead of us who have done so much work and service and love. We are the result of their love. And then with the idea that hoping that our youth are going to grow their faith and their testimonies as a result of this time spent together, that they're going to be able to later ka'i, or lead their families, themselves, their friends, anybody that they come in contact with, to the Savior, the same way that our loved ones did for us. So just
Wow,
so
that's
much
great.
wrapped up in that name itself, just from excursion. No, this is not just an excursion, right? So
Yeah, that's really fantastic. Marlise, maybe just give us the 35,000 foot view of what this was like. What's a cultural trek look like, and how did it differ? I mean, what is this thing that we're talking about? Maybe just give us a summary of it all.
Well, it was 3 days. Or was it 4 days? Was it 4 days? LaRae? It was 4 days. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we broke them up into different areas. So our first day was the kai, or the ocean. So we did everything from net fishing, laying net, fishing, cleaning the fish, learning how to clean the fish, learning about ocean life, and learning to the va'a, or the canoe navigators. And then the second day was kula, which was the land that's near the ocean. So we did lauhala weaving and kihe stamping, stamping made from traditional plants, and learning a ha'a, sanding, carving, an awamo stick, makihiki games. So a lot of cultural activities. And then our third day was uka, or upland area. And we visited a kalo farm, or taro farm. And we did poi pounding. And then that night we came back, and all the wards had prepared a performance for the hoike. So a lot of whatever their ward wanted to do, whether it was a hula or a song or a skit, whatever, we shared that. And then our last day was lani, is the heavens. So we had our testimony meeting, but also scattered in that we had interviews. Some of the youth had talked to kupuna in the area, or some of the elderly people that had been members, some of the pioneers of our wards,
wow.
and had done interviews with them. And so we showed that. And then many of the youth also they were all invited to do like an ancestor poster. So we had an ancestor gallery walk where they could learn about all of their different ancestors. So it was jam-packed full of activities, but really an immersive experience. So we weren't just sitting there listening about the pioneers of Hawaii. It was actually going out, doing these cultural activities and working together, and getting a taste of what our Hawaiian ancestors did, and also getting to experience that those cultural traditions.
Wow, nice. Anything you'd add to that, LaRae?
I think I would add that in all of that, there was so much preparation as well. Like there were activities before the trek, like months ahead, that they had to prepare for, right? They had to prepare their sticks. They had to prepare their posters. That took time to research, and that's kind of how it was designed, where they take the time and energy. Leaders, parents, youth alike had to put work in, even to the point of gathering leaves with thorns and cleaning it to prepare it for this activity that was going to happen. And so that if you didn't prepare, you could still participate. There's always a loving leader that's going to prepare extra for those who didn't come. But your experience is just that much richer because you did all the preparation that was required. And so when you got there, you were ready for everything. And so I think that doing all of those activities that Marlise mentioned came with a lot of preparation that needed to be done before, so that they could really fully enjoy just what was presented.
Yeah. And then was there any, I know as far as after the experience, was there, follow-up fireside or sacrament talks or anything?
There were. Each ward could choose to do that. I know in our ward, we had several of the youth come and speak about their Huaka'i experience. So that was wonderful for those that were not able to come, or, just people in the ward, and to know what the youth were doing. So there was a lot of talk about that. And I think the next Fast and Testimony meeting, there was still more youth that got up and talked about their experience, and leaders also.
Yeah. Now I'm just thinking, like, obviously with the traditional pioneer track, a lot of the story is that, there was a lot of walking going on, right? And pulling hand carts and things. And so did you still do a trek like that where you're covering a lot of ground by walking each day, or was that different?
It was different. I don't think we didn't necessarily walk a lot of ground, but built into it with like the format that Marlise shared, we went down to the ocean, and then we had workshops on another day of learning, right? And then we went to the so we covered a lot of ground in that way, meaning we went from the ocean then to workshops, and then we went to a Hilo farm, which was several hours. Actually, that was our trek, yeah, Marlise, on the buses. Right. Because it really was on the others, a couple hours away to get there. And then, of course, spiritually, so we kind of covered ground that way, not necessarily in the physical walking.
Yeah. Interesting. And then, so it sounds like, it was sort of in between of maybe a traditional trek and a traditional youth conference, right? Where you're not necessarily walking a lot in youth conference, but you're having different activities. But this is focused on culture and ancestry and those types of things that to make it more of an experience of connecting with your past, right?
Yes. And I do feel like we tried to, in every of the meetings, of course, I didn't attend all those meetings because, like we said, we tried to keep it as the committee heads doing their thing. And then as they needed us to come, they'd invite us to come to certain meetings, and we'd report, would report to us. And if they had questions or anything, then they would ask us for help and things like that. And so we tried to leave that for them to, have make decision-making things happen in the committee.
And that maybe leads to my question of, as far as just like adult leadership support, you talk about these committees and whatnot, and, traditional treks, they'll do ma and pas, that where it's natural to break them up into groups and whatnot, and then have, specific adult leaders over those groups. Were you doing something similar, or maybe just unpack what the dynamic of the adult leaders, like how many and what they did?
We did actually try to do that. They've got that handbook, right? That trek and reenactment handbook. It's a whole book full of all of the things and all the components that you would normally have. And I believe we did do our best to follow that. So when you asked that question about whether or not we had those mas and pas, and we did, but we didn't call them ma and pa, because in Hawaii, we call them our makua. Makua is the word for parents. And we did pick husband and wife teams to be the parents of the groups. And we had mixed groups from all the different wards, because we wanted the youth to have that experience of getting to know others, not just within their own wards, but we kept them in age group so that we could, developmentally and the way they interact with each other would be more similar, I think, by keeping them in age like that. And so
yeah, that was purposeful, because so many of our state covers one half of our island, and it's a big island. And so some of the youth, especially because of COVID and just our school situation, there's private schools, there's public schools. So you don't necessarily go to the same school as those even in your own ward. And because we hadn't had a lot of stake activities during COVID, and the youth were so isolated that there were a lot that didn't even know each other, that they were members. Like my son, when he went to Huaka'i, he realized that he had people in his class that were members, and he didn't know. So we thought it was really important that they be in those age groups to get to be able to bond with each other, understand kind of that same age group, what they were going through, experience that together.
Yeah. And that's another point you just mentioned there, that this was during COVID that you pulled this off. What summer was it?
Actually, it happened just this past spring. spring
Oh, okay.
break. And so things
Oh,
were
okay.
just beginning to open up. Um, yeah, just beginning to open up. And we still had to have the kids. We did have them. They were wearing masks part of the
For the
time
inside,
inside.
yes. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But they were ready. They just, it was spring break. They wanted to be outside. They got to go to the beach and get in the water and just, things that we hadn't been able to do before, they were able to do. It was just the timing of everything it was great.
Okay, so it worked
Yeah.
out. Nice, awesome. You mentioned you had did you charter buses for this in order to take everybody to a specific location, and how did that
We
work as far as
did.
travel?
We chartered buses. Luckily, it was spring break, like we said, right? If not, they wouldn't have been available to us. But, one of the interesting things also is during that time, there was some road work happening that did not allow us to take the normal route we would to this location. The normal route would have taken us maybe about 45 minutes to an hour to get there had we gone the normal. But because traffic patterns were not normal, we had to go double that time. It took us 2.5 hours to get there because we had to go around. So, anyways, just interesting the kinds of things that came about that we normally wouldn't have planned for, but did. And it just really helped shape the experience that happened, right? Marlise kind of mentioned with the buses, the chartered buses, this long 2.5 hour that should have been only an hour allowed the youth to have the party bus experience.
Yeah, very cool. Nice. But and then once you got there, I mean, there was a little bit of traveling on the bus each day, but I mean, it wasn't long travel day to day.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Awesome. And then where did where did they sleep? Or, I know with the traditional trek, you're camping under the stars some nights, and but so how
Right.
did that work?
Yeah, so we didn't sleep over because of
Oh,
so that
okay.
was one of the COVID things, right? When we were
Yeah.
originally planning, it would have been like camping out, and that was one of the things we were trying to overcome. So it really was like a glorified or a huge youth conference. Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody went home, but we packed those days. They came early and they stayed late, and we just really called on the parents to be as supportive as they could we know it's late nights, we know it's early mornings, but please just have them there and ready.
Yeah.
So,
And now with less and less restrictions, I mean, would it be, if you were to do it again, you would probably do an overnight type of thing or camping or whatnot?
oh, definitely. Yeah. We
Okay.
would have done an overnight, several days, same way. Yeah.
Cool.
Right. When we originally were planning this, like, what was it, 6, 9 months ahead of time, we were still well into COVID. So we didn't even know for sure
Yeah.
until it got closer if we'd be able to even do what we did.
Yeah. Interesting. And then, so how many, you talk about the adult support and whatnot. How many individuals did you need to ask the words to provide or call for the event?
Our committee, we had maybe 6, 8 couples. And then our stake young men and young women's president, we had the Makua. I'm trying to think now how many groups we had, 8 or 9 groups. And so there were quite a few adults involved. It was a massive effort.
Mm-hmm.
And we scheduled monthly meetings online with the wards. So the wards knew what to do to prep each month because we had a list of different things they had to go out and collect or go out and do. And so it was really well organized. We could have that cooperation.
Yeah. Cool. So any other component or dynamic that we haven't discussed or impact yet as far as how the whole event went?
We called on a lot of people in the stake to help with the cultural activities, which was amazing. They really, from even showing us how to throw net, so the net goes out and then the youth go in the water and they're splashing the fish. They're like forming a line and they're splashing the fish into the net, and then they have to gather it and bring it in. And then, they're cleaning the fish. So they're using the opihi, the limpet shells to clean the fish. And we had it fried up for dinner that night. So,
Wow.
I mean, just so many people that came and gave of their time and of their expertise, to help enrich all the activities. It was a huge effort, but we're so grateful for just what they were willing to give.
Wow. What an experience. And I'm just thinking, back when I was a youth, I think I learned how to foursquare dance, rather than getting in the ocean and throwing net and whatever. But hey, I guess when you're in Hawaii, you might as well take advantage of those things. So
I think that was the hope, though. I mean, if you live here in Hawaii, we're on an island that could possibly be isolated, right? If the shipping barges stopped, you really do have to rely on the ocean and your surroundings to survive. And so these activities we had hoped would be things that they can real life skills, right? I mean, even if you didn't, you've got a net, you've got a whole bunch of friends, let's get in the water, and that was something. I mean, the place we went to, I know that there's fish. We've done it before. But I still had to, our prayers of faith was, I hope we have enough to feed everybody, that kind of thing. And there was, and there was more than enough, but that these kids went away with skills, or at least understanding that if I need to, I can. This is where it is. I've seen it done. And if I work hard enough, I can do this too.
Yeah.
What
would you say just in terms of just the youth experience, what they came about, what were they saying coming away from that, or what do they remember most or reflect on? Anything come to mind?
Well, this is the thing. At the testimony meeting, we just realized that they gained different things out of it. And that's kind of one of the principles we wanted to talk about, was this idea of a spiritual buffet. As sometimes we prescribe when they're going to feel the Spirit and what activities are the spiritual activities. But because they were so engaged, we heard a huge variety of their experiences and what it meant to them, things that we wouldn't have thought. And one of them was the party bus. I was on the party bus, and it was a bunch of kids you would never in a million years put together and have them singing, but they were just singing just random songs off the radio. They were singing, 80s music. They were singing Disney songs, and, these big Hawaiian boys, out in Honolulu. We just would never have thought they would, but they loved it. And it was not a reverent bus. I mean, they were loud. They were, just singing along at the top of their lungs. And then so many of them got up at testimony meeting and just said that it just meant so much to them, because they just felt like they could connect with each other. They just felt the Spirit. They just felt it strengthened their testimony. So that was an important thing for us to learn, is that the youth can feel the Spirit in all these different activities. And if we give them a variety of activities to engage in, that they will take out of it what they need.
Yeah. Man, what a great point. Just getting in the mindset that all activities you do, even if it's a simple bus ride between activities, all activities are a spiritual activity, because some connect spiritually in ways that others don't. Right. And I think we just have this long tradition of we want to, I think this has sort of died off with traditional treks, but we do the Mormon battalion march, right, where all the women are left behind to pull, and we're trying to orchestrate the spiritual moment where the women have to rely on their own strength and faith, which again, I can see why that could be powerful or interesting to explore. But sometimes we try too hard to orchestrate sort of this moment, when in reality it's let's just gather together, focus on Christ and focus on our ancestry and tradition, and through that, everybody's going to find that spiritual moment that really can't be forced or orchestrated.
Yeah, definitely. That is definitely what happened. Yeah. And I think that's a huge point for all of us as leaders to remember, right? No matter what level of leadership we're at, that sometimes we just work so hard to overcomplicate something that doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
Spirit is going to do its job.
Yeah. I'm just curious, like with hindsight, what are some of the big things that you change or do differently?
I think we try to, and then within the church today, there's a lot of encouraging us to have the youth participate more in the planning process. And I don't know that we did at the ward levels, right? Try to encourage the youth. But I think more youth engagement in the leadership planning portion, but like this wasn't charted before, right? For us, this was kind of new, and it came together in the way that it did. So we definitely learned as leaders how this went. But I think in hindsight, I think more youth participation in the planning and leading portion of it could have been really good.
There was initially, like we had, LaRae there was a survey sent out.
Yes.
Or there was a meeting. And so we had asked them what kinds of activities they would like to do, what kind of food, what would they like incorporated. And so some of the activities came from that.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Nice. So the first principle you have here is a cultural-based trek is an opportunity to show the youth how their culture aligns with the gospel. And I know we've touched on that to some extent. Anything else in that topic that we haven't covered?
Yeah, I think that here in Hawaii, sometimes because there's that cultural identity, and there's also identity as a member of the church, that sometimes our youth see those as either or. And they don't understand how they integrate. So we had different Hawaiian values listed, and really they were all gospel values. And so we tried to focus as much as we could on how some of the things already in the culture, some of our traditions, some of our values are really just the same as gospel values. And so they can integrate, and we could be living the way we live according to our culture, right? And yet it's in harmony with the gospel. So I think sometimes we may focus on maybe practices or things that maybe don't align with the gospel, but in reality, so much of a person's culture is really the gospel. It's just shaped by where you live or who you're surrounded with.
Anything you'd add to that, LaRae?
It may be just that we definitely did see that and hear that from one youth in particular after her experience. And everyone's cultural experience is different, right? Based on how much of the culture they're immersed in. And so this one particular youth has a lot of cultural immersion, right? She participates in language, dancing, and not until after this experience, I think, was able to really connect the gospel and the culture, where she could see how it was similar, and there was so much that were the same.
Yeah. Awesome. Germaine, you made it back.
I did. I went to the stake center and came right back.
Nice. Well, I'm sorry you missed so much of our discussion, but we'd love to get your point of views as we wrap up here. But and then looks like the other principle here is a cultural-based trek helps those inside and outside the culture to understand each other better. Anything else we haven't touched on around that topic?
I do want to say that the pioneers that are in Hawaii are just as important pioneers that made the trek across the plains. And I think that it's important for our youth to see their kupuna or their grandparents as true pioneers who helped to build the church here when there was no temple, when there's no prophet around. So the extreme amount of faith that it took for our kupuna or our grandparents to be able to build a church that was not established here and do it with such faith and with such promise. I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, in a traditional trek, you may go back kind of 200 years to the early church, but maybe in Hawaii, you only go back 100 years or whatever, depending on where you're at in the world. But still to focus on those people, the struggle, and the problems look different. Maybe they weren't burying babies on the Pioneer Trail, but they were, sacrificing to make it to the temple, or, I'm sure you've got story after story about really framing that sacrifice so that they can connect to it personally, thinking, no, that's part of me and my heritage, right? Awesome.
Absolutely. My grandfather gave part of his land and his property to build the church that's no longer there, but nonetheless, it was a church that served the community as well as the LDS church. And so the school across the street would have their Christmas programs and their, banquets there.
Yeah.
And it was a church that my grandparents and parents were raised in. We also did Kalua Pig, or we had a garden that families grew and had white elephant in order for us to make it to the temple. And so the temple is on another island, but it's expensive. It's really expensive. And so for our youth to have the opportunity to go with their parents and grandparents, and they went as families to the temple. And so our youth stayed at BYU Hawaii during the summer for a week. So you would leave on a Tuesday and come back on a Saturday. And in that week, the youth participated at BYU Hawaii while the parents went and did temple work in Laie. And so these are really faith promoting experiences that our children don't really know about because we have a temple here. So they don't know some of the sacrifices that our grandparents made for us.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, adding to that, we had one ward that for their cultural presentation for the Hoike, one of the wards in the building split, and so their ward was moved to another building, and so they chose to talk about the early saints in Hawaii who had sacrificed to build that building. And now we look at it, and it's a little bit older, yeah, and we complain a lot about, the bathrooms always breaking down, and, it's just older and there's some complaining. But watching that and seeing those early pictures of the saints who fundraised and who built things with their own hands, seeing that just gave us a greater appreciation for that building and loving it, even though, the carpet that's coming up, or, what you have there, but it gave us a real appreciation for those sacrifices, right? And the other thing, Kurt, I did want to mention, for instance, in my ward, it's a very mixed ward of those families that have been here for a while and families that are moving in. It's a kind of a transient ward, and there's a lot of families from the mainland that come in, and sometimes that cultural differences can lead to misunderstanding and hurt. And some of our local youth that do have Hawaiian ancestry can sometimes feel like they're being a little bit disrespected because those that come in may not know context or may not understand a cultural background, and that happened. Our youth for our ward were learning a hula, and some of the youth had never danced before, felt very uncomfortable, didn't understand really the background or context of hula, and so some of the things they see on TV or media, they were kind of doing little movements and things that to some of the youth that grew up doing hula and it had great meaning, it felt very disrespectful. So it was being able to talk about those things and letting the youth know what's proper and what's not, just bridging that gap culturally. And so I felt like it was a really great opportunity for some of those bridges to be crossed, right? To work together. So the youth that may not know too much about Hawaiian culture or history, it helped them to be immersed in it and to feel like they understood it a little better. And then those that already this is part of their culture, to be able to see those that were trying to learn and trying to be a part of it too. It helped them to appreciate the efforts.
Something else I did observe as a result of that is that we have a lot of youth in our stake who are language speakers. They are immersed in the Hawaiian language. And those youth tend to be shy and sometimes don't say a whole lot. But by the end of Trek or this Huaka'i experience, they were shining and they were leaders and they led all the youth. And I think because they felt confident in the things that they know and they've learned about the culture, and that they could help others to connect and do, to be part of that. There were things that they knew and that they could teach, and they felt comfortable doing it. And so it was such a great thing to be able to see those youth come out of themselves and really lead in those areas.
I love that. Those are great experiences to hear about. Well, so just to recap of everything, like I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of those individuals listening, thinking, we could do something similar to this. And I want to make sure we just cover the big ideas generally. So before, in preparation, there were maybe some firesides. Youth had assignments to maybe do some research about specific individuals, either in their personal family or just in the culture there, and anything else generally that took place leading up to the trek.
I mean, I think it's really short summary of what happened. So there was a huge planning committee that happened. And I think the basis is having the hua and the ka'i. So the hua being the fruit and the ka'i being the journey into the fruit.
That's cool. And man, we didn't even touch on, traditional tricks. There's such this emphasis on dress code and what you can wear and what you can't wear. It sounds like there's some level of a dress code or an encouragement of what to wear. Maybe talk about that.
Yeah. So Marlise is wearing the shirt.
Oh, nice.
And so this has a lot of significance. We really need to share it to you. So the H over there in the front, that's really the compass. And that compass is set on Christ. So if you get closer and you can see it, and we'll send it to you, it's really centered on Christ. And it's a sun. The U there, let's see, I can't really see. There it is. That stands for the kihei. And so a kihei is a piece of cloth that they worked really hard on, and they had to stamp their generation. So a generation before them, their generation, and their future generation. So it's kind of like linking their fathers to their sons and their sons to the fathers and the children. And so thinking about teaching children that you matter, but you matter in a bigger picture. And so that represents the kihei that they use. The middle one is our Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And it's also a symbolism of our mauna, which is our mountain here that's really covered with snow right now,
really?
Which is interesting for your listeners. Yes. And we'll send you a picture of that. Awesome. But it's Mauna Kea. It's a sacred mauna to us, and it's something that we all can see from Keao to Puna. We all can see, and it kind of like it's the pinnacle of our island. The K there is a kalo, and the kalo is really a taro. And this is something that grounds us as ohana. So the oha, or that stem, that word oha, it feeds into ohana. And really, ohana means family. And so this ties us, and the youth got to go and not pull the kalo, but pound the kalo and make pa'iai, which is the thing right before poi. And for you, it might be mashed potatoes, but for us, it's gold. But it's a staple food, and it's not only nourishing, but it's just beautiful. Yeah. Absolutely beautiful. And we eat all parts of the kalo, but we also replant, and we make that generation keep living and living by picking little huli or the little baby shoots that come off, And that it's just such a beautiful thing to recycle that back. And we eat the leaves, we make lau lau. We just love using the kalo. The next one is the A. I can't really see. Oh, that one was beautiful. That stands for a lahala or a pandanus. So if you know what a pandanus is, there's thorns on it. The youth had to go in prior to the Huaka'i, go with their wards and pick it and strip it and cut it into little pieces. And there's a stem that goes right in the middle made of bamboo. And the youth weave, and it's about marriage, eternal marriage. Our heavenly, a mother, a father, and it's centered on that stem is Christ. And so not everybody got to finish that. That was a really hard project. My grandmother was a weaver as well, and it takes a lot of time. And so we're so proud. Some people came out with a star, some people came out with a bookmark, but the idea was to, just to get their hands ma'a, or used to weaving. There's a okina there, and so in English we would say a glottal stop. So it looks like an apostrophe, but it goes the other way. And that is called the
Umeke. Umeke, like a
Meke?
gourd,
Was that
but
the-
it's got a net
Yes.
around the gourd.
And so that is for the really, we took them holo holo or fishing. And so they got to go holo holo and lay net, chase the fish, catch the fish, clean the fish, eat the fish. It was just amazing. It was things that we did as youth, but I haven't done it for like 20 years. So it was amazing. And then the last one is the va'a. So the va'a is a canoe. And so really, when you read about Hagoth and all of that, that is how our ancestors came across the ocean. And the airplane was our va'a. And so we didn't there was no airplanes, but traveling between Samoa, Tahiti, New Zealand, Marquesian Islands, and Hawaii was all through the va'a. And that's how we started. We had real navigators come and teach us about food preparation and how food storage played an important role in storing for the trek, because you can't order meals. There's no McDonald's on a va'a when you're traveling between islands. So how important that was, and the faith that took you to your next journey, and always, praying and relying on Heavenly Father for that journey.
Wow.
So that's how it was amazing.
And
Yeah,
so
it was
everybody
amazing.
that participated got a shirt that like that. And did they wear it most days, or did you have any direction as far as dress code and things?
So the shirt was mainly worn to the lo'i. So we call it a mala if it's on land, or lo'i kalo if it's having water. And so that is the day that we journeyed, and it's a while. So the kihe was worn on the last day with their Sunday best. Of course, for our first day, so we did I think they probably talked about it, but a kai kula uka lani. So kai, we started from the beach. Kula is the plains or the lands. Uka is the mountain, and lani is the heavens. And so kai, of course, we did allow them to wear their bathing suits with T-shirts and shorts, because they also did service projects.
Perfect. Wow, what an experience. And I think it should just be mandated that we have to go to Hawaii, all stakes around the world, to do the trek. So what a fun experience.
It would be great for whoever's in charge the next time.
So, but man, this is so fun to learn about. I know there's so many nuances and intricacies that people will just kind of explore and figure out on their own.
Can I just add that, like, that's so true about the way, there was counsels and there was patterns and things that we talked about that, when you set out to do something, you foresee it happening a certain way. We kind of touched on this a little bit before, but what I think everyone realized, or we know this, but to see it play out this way was that this is not our work. And that was just very, very clear as we moved through the planning process and we got closer. We ran into roadblocks and different things, but in the end, that this event really was not ours. It was the Lord's, and what the outcome was is what our youth needed. Our youth. I mean, you couldn't duplicate this exactly and have the same outcome, because this was the way that it came out, was the way that the Lord needed it to be for these leaders, for all of us as leaders. I mean, we all learned so much working together. For these youth, what they learned individually and together. For the parents of these youth, I believe there was learning, it's just for so many that really this is the Lord's work. So that's what we saw happen.